Inshallah, we're about to start the program. Those who have completed their prayers, can you please move forward closer this way? And those who are in the hallways, please come inside. And we'll just give one more minute and we'll start with the Quran. And then our speaker, Ali Khalil, is here. He will start the program. It's a short program. It's a 1 hour program. But it is a very, very important program, especially considering what's happening these days and what is the position of this country regarding this issue of Jerusalem and Palestine. And all of us have a responsibility, and I hope we understand that. It is not a situation of Palestinian Muslims, it's a situation for all Muslims. And this is something, it's a special place for us in our heart, in the Quran, in our deen. And what is being done, everybody knows that. But then we have to look at ourselves and see what is our responsibility. We may think that we cannot do anything. That is really not true. All of us can do something. And that's what we are thinking about it. We have to complete our responsibility. So the brother will talk about the history. The brother will talk about the current circumstances, the significance of the place. He will definitely get into a lot more detail. I'll introduce him a little bit more. Let's start with the Quran. Hafiz Tahir, Hafiz Rafi Dawood will do the Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى سبحان ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الذي أقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنريه من آياتنا إنه هو السميع البصير وآتينا موسى الكتاب وجعلناه هدى لبني إسرائيل ألا تتخذوا من دوني وكيلا ذرية من حملنا مع نوح إنه كان عبدا شكورا وقضينا إلى بني إسرائيل في الكتاب لتفسدن في الأرض مرتين ولتعلن علوا كبيرا فإذا جاء ما بعثنا عليكم عبادا لنا أولي بأس شديد فجاسوا خلال الديار وكان وعدا مفعولا ثم رددنا لكم الكرة عليهم وأمددناكم بأموال وبنين وجعلناكم أكثر نفيرا إن أحسنتم لأنفسكم فإذا جاء وعد الآخرة ليسوءوا وليدخلوا المسجد كما دخلوه وليدخلوا المسجد كما دخلوه أول مرة وليتبروا ما علوا تتبيرا عسى ربكم أن يرحمكم وإن عدتم عدنا وجعلنا جهنم للكافرين حصيرا إن هذا القرآن يهدي للتي هي أقوم إن هذا القرآن يهدي للتي هي أقوم ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا كبيرا وأن الذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة أعتدنا لهم عذابا أليما صدق الله العظيم.
Inshallah, with a very brief introduction of our speaker, Tariq Khalil, I'll invite him to join me here. Tariq Khalil is an attorney, activist. He does a lot of volunteer work for CARE on the legal issues. He is a board member of American Muslim for Palestine. He gives lectures on the subject of Palestine all over the place, the international law, and that's what his expertise is. So, one more thing I would like to say about Tariq. He is originally a Palestinian. He did his schooling, elementary, couple of blocks from Masjid Al-Aqsa. So he's very much attached and very much knowledgeable of this whole situation in the area.
Assalamu alaikum. Just take a moment. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It's an honor to be here. It was quite a drive, but definitely well worth it. This is a very exciting topic for me, especially because as a Muslim and as a Palestinian, not only do I have a religious connection, I have a personal connection, I have a historical connection to Jerusalem, and all of you have strong connection to this phenomenal holy land. I want to start by just going through some basic aspects of the history of Al-Quds because it's incumbent upon us as Muslims to educate our young people, to arm them with information so that when they go out in the public, that the propaganda that pervades our media does not influence them, does not guide them in the wrong direction. They need to understand that our roots are deep in Jerusalem. The holiness of Jerusalem provided a sense of historical connection that stems through many centuries. And we need to understand that the golden age of Jews in Al-Quds was under Islamic rule. It was under Islamic rule that they thrived as a community. For the 4 or so centuries that Christians ruled the land, Jews were not allowed inside Al-Aqsa area. They were kicked out. They were dispossessed, essentially. And the area that they found holy to them was mocked, garbage. It was made into a garbage dump. And when Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu came in 638 and liberated, opened up Al-Quds, what he did essentially was he brought the Jews back. He told the Christians that were there that their shrines, that their holy structures would remain intact, would remain in place. But even before Umar ibn Khattab, we need to understand that Prophet Muhammad والسلام, And the Isra wal Mi'raj is directly connected to Al-Aqsa. From Mecca to Al-Aqsa, Isra, and the Mi'raj, the ascension from Al-Aqsa to the seventh heaven. Both of these incidents, both of these events are connected to Al-Aqsa. And then Zionists, what they try to do is say, use simple, basic propaganda, and you would easily fall for it if you don't understand basic history and if you don't understand Islam. What they try to say is, well, Jerusalem is mentioned hundreds of times in the Bible. Jerusalem is mentioned 0 times in the Quran. Therefore, it is more holy to us than it is to you. But of course, they haven't read the Quran. They don't know that it's referenced many, many times. Bayt al-Maqdis, Bayt al-Muqaddasa, the Holy Land. It is referenced in context to area as well. God said, this is the land that we made blessed for the whole world. الْأَرْضَ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. So this is the land that we made blessed for everyone. This is throughout the Quran. Nabi Muhammad ﷺ, during his time when he was preaching, the ruler of Rome, the Byzantine Empire, Heraclius, was in Al-Quds when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ sent him a letter inviting him to embrace Islam. And Abu Sufyan, who was the leader of the Quraysh, who was an enemy of the Prophet up to a certain point, and then when he converted to Islam, but before he converted to Islam, he visited Heraclius, and Heraclius essentially interrogated him and asked him, who is this man that sent me this letter? And then he went through a whole barrage of questions. Is this man noble? He said yes. The reason why he had to answer honestly is because he did not want his followers to view him as a liar. He wanted to maintain his credibility. And his followers knew that Prophet Muhammad was a noble man. And he went through very specific questions and asked them, okay, what does this man force you to do? What does he tell you to do? He tells us to give charity, to pray, to treat our women with respect, all of these wonderful qualities that you expect out of a human being. And then he said, okay, when you have your wars, who wins? Sometimes he wins, sometimes we win. Okay, does this man treat his followers with respect, with the utmost respect? So he concluded based on that. If it is true that you're telling me this man is who you say he is, if he is who you say he is, then the land beneath my feet will one day belong to him. Because he knew this man must be a prophet of God. A message out in public to his own followers. Now we're talking about Heraclius. We're talking about the most powerful politician of the day in the world. It was a powerful empire. Umar ibn Khattab, when he went to Al-Quds and opened it up, the patriarch of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and I believe I have an image of it here. This is it right here. This image is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is how it looks today. Umar ibn Khattab was invited to pray in this church when he entered Al-Quds. Do you know what he said? He said, no, I'll pray outside because I know that my followers will say, Omar prayed here and will desecrate it and build a mosque in its place. I want to respect your shrine. I want to respect your infrastructure. And he prayed, but not inside the church. And lo and behold, the mosque, Masjid al-Umar, was built right where he prayed. So he knew that his followers would end up doing this. In a sense, this was kind of prophetic. He was not a prophet, but this was prophetic. So he knew that something would happen, but he did not want to desecrate the holy place for Christians. And when the Dome of the Rock, Qubbat al-Sakhra, and Masjid al-Aqsa were both built in Al-Quds, Zionists articulate this as a way of indicating that they built it on the ruins of our holy places. When in fact, Islam is an all-inclusive, all-encompassing religion. We don't only bear witness to the prophethood of Muhammad ﷺ, but also to Sayyidina Isa, Sayyidina Musa, Sayyidina Dawud, Sayyidina Sulaiman, Sayyidina Isa, all of the prophets that the prior monotheistic, prior Abrahamic faiths embraced, we also embrace. So this structure here is a testament to all of those figures, not at the expense of those figures. Same is true for Masjid Al-Aqsa. Now, Allah indicates throughout various parts of the Quran and in the Sunnah indicates that not only is the land itself blessed, but the land around it is also blessed. That must be referring to Palestine. And it is on that basis that these wonderful structures were built. And it was during Muslim reign, during Islamic reign, that all three monotheistic faiths thrived. This is the exact line used by current Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. It is under Israeli sovereignty that all three faiths have thrived. He's using truthful words about a different period. It was that way under a different rulership, not under your rulership, but it was that way under a different rulership. Your people were dispossessed. It is Muslims that brought them back. It is Muslims, the golden age of Jews was during Islamic rule. And let's talk about presence for just a brief moment. About 400 to 500 years, Jews had this land. Christians had it for about 500 to 600 years. Muslims, 13 centuries of continuous presence, continuous rule in this land. And it was during that time that these communities thrived. From 638 AD to 1099, and then the Crusades that ruled for about 100 years that broke up that chain. But after that was done, Salah ad-Din in 1187 came and then continued on all the way up until 1917. Even during Ottoman rule, even during the Ottoman period, Jews thrived. It was during that period, near the end of that period, that they wanted to accelerate and they wanted to build at the expense of another people. And that's when the Zionists come in. It was only the last 100 years that you've had this tension between Jews and Muslims. This was not centuries old. This is not a centuries old conflict. This is a recent conflict that was perpetrated by a racist ideology. Now the United Nations comes into place. What you see on the farther left, farther right, my right, the farther picture. This represents, the green here represents Palestinian ownership all the way up until 1947. The white represents Jewish settlements. It was during this period that Jews started to slowly but surely take over the land, and the original inhabitants, the Palestinians, who are descendants from the Canaanites, who have been in this land for 5,000 years. The land was not founded by Jews. It was not founded by Christians. Yes, it was not founded by Muslims either. It was founded by people who still exist today, who embraced Judaism at one point, who embraced Christianity at one point, and then later embraced Islam. And that's why the majority were Muslims at the time of Zionist colonization that began in 1882. So don't let their invocation of religion, that their book came before our book, therefore they were there first and therefore it's more holy to them. That kind of chronological argument doesn't work in terms of quality. It was during Islamic rule that your community thrived. That's the best response. In 1947, the baby United Nations, it was just been in existence for about 2 years, established in 1945. They decided to partition Palestine into a Jewish state or an Arab state. They didn't call it a Palestinian state because they did not recognize any nationality of any people other than Jews in that area. So they called it an Arab state. Notice that yellow dot there. That's Al-Quds. That's Jerusalem. Why is that a different color? Because of that deep history, that deep connection, that monotheistic connection to that land. And because of its special status under Ottoman rule as an independent area, they said, okay, we'll give the Jews this much, but we can't go all out. So Jerusalem must remain under what is called a corpus separatum, which is Latin for separate entity, separate. So Al-Quds was declared to be an international zone to be placed under a special international regime, not under the sovereignty of anybody. And that includes the newly established state of Israel. It's not under your sovereignty either. So when the war broke out in 1948, we ended up with this. Now this is called the West Bank, that's called Gaza. And how did these lines form, by the way? How did this happen? This was as a result of an agreement between Israel and Jordan called an armistice agreement. They signed an agreement in 1949 saying, all right, your armies ended up here. That's where we're going to draw the line. One of the representatives had a green marker, and they drew it like this, and it became known as the Green Line. And this established a de facto division of Jerusalem. West Jerusalem to Israel, East Jerusalem. We're going to annex it. We're going to leave it for further negotiations for a further date because it is not under our jurisdiction, but we're going to control it in the meantime. What did Israel do? Annexed it, took West Jerusalem and treated it as though it is part of its own territory. International community did not recognize that. They said, you can do it all you want, but there is no sovereignty recognized in West Jerusalem. We always talk about East Jerusalem because of what happened in 1967. 1967, all of that was gone. And Israel took control of the West Bank, Gaza, and other territories. We're not going to get into that, we can be here for days. But they took control of the West Bank and Gaza and immediately annexed East Jerusalem. Took it for its own. International community did not recognize that either. United Nations Resolution 181 established the international regime, corpus separatum, separate body. United Nations Resolution 194 established a conciliation commission, and that commission had determined that Jerusalem would be accorded special and separate treatment, different treatment from any of the other territories. It's special. We're going to accord it special treatment. So we're not going to recognize your rule over it. Abba Eban, who was the Israeli representative, now remember, 1949, Israel, or 1948, Israel was still not admitted into the United Nations. They wanted full membership status in the United Nations. Well, if you want membership status, you have to accept UN resolution. That's a condition precedent to your admission into the United Nations. So they said, okay, fine. We'll accept Resolution 181. We'll accept Resolution 194. 194 said that the Palestinian refugees, Laji'in, can return to their homes. Also said that Jerusalem does not belong to them. They accepted it to get in. Once they got in, they rescinded it and continued on with their occupation of West Jerusalem. And then in 1967, they annexed East Jerusalem. The United Nations did not agree with that either and condemned and deplored those actions. Now notice the language of the United Nations, the language that it uses to express its disapproval of Israeli actions. We disagree and we deplore and we condemn the changing of the physical character, demographic composition, and institutional structure of Jerusalem. Those are key words. You can't change the population. You can't change the area in terms of culture, structure, all of that. You can't change any of that. None of that is recognized under international law as legitimate. That is why no state in the world has an embassy in Jerusalem. There's a reason for that. reason is it's not recognized as part of the sovereignty of that state. Israel is recognized, but not that part, not West Jerusalem. So when Donald Trump made his declaration that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, they asked a very simple question to his ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. Simple question. What does that mean? Does that mean the old city? Does that mean East Jerusalem? Does that mean West Jerusalem? What? All of Jerusalem? What's going on? Well, we're going to leave that up for another day. We're going to let the parties decide that. We don't know. He just said the whole of Jerusalem. What does that mean? They don't know what it means. But he wanted to be different because no other president would recognize that that is Israel's capital in their presidency. They recognize it in their campaign. Obama said it multiple times. Jerusalem would remain the undivided capital of Israel. He said that to an AIPAC audience. Same thing with Bill Clinton. Said the same thing. Now, throughout all this time, the United Nations condemned Israeli actions in Jerusalem. But it's key for us to understand that Israel passed a law in 1980 that said that Jerusalem would be the united capital of Israel, all of Jerusalem. The UN acted as well, and they responded to those actions, said, we don't recognize any of that. All of that is wrong. So you have this history. You have this history of illegality, of unjust behavior, that now Trump is trying to make just and trying to pretty much tell the UN, we don't care what you say. We don't care what your views are. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister, understands that he's in a quagmire because he wants as much territory as possible with as least amount of Palestinians as possible. So how do I do that when the Palestinian population continues to grow? That's a problem. But not only is the population in the West Bank and Gaza a problem, the population within what is recognized as Israeli territory, that's also a problem. Because 20% of the population and growing within that territory, within 1948 Palestine, within what's called the Green Line, 20% is Palestinian, or what they call Arab Israeli. Notice they don't mention them in nationalistic terms. Inside their territory, they don't recognize them in nationalistic terms. In Zionist discourse, they're viewed as Arab Israelis. We can call them Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. They can carry nationalistic presence there because they don't vote. Who cares? So this is the dilemma that Benjamin Netanyahu is facing. In 1995, Congress enacted a law called the Jerusalem Embassy Act. And in that law, to like that law, because this was in 1995. What happened in 1993? The Oslo Accords, right? Yasser Arafat came to Washington, D.C., shook hands with Yitzhak Rabin. It was actually Arafat that extended his hand. Yitzhak Rabin just kind of slapped it. But that famous handshake, Bill Clinton thought, okay, we can actually get something. This legislation, but Congress overwhelmingly wants it. So he said, okay, if that's the case, over it. But I want something in that legislation that allows me time to do it on my own time. I want to do it when I think it's right. I don't want it to be at a specific date. Okay, so we'll create a waiver. Every 6 months, you can decide to waive that part of the law that says that you have to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem every 6 months for national security purposes. So the legislation came to his desk. He didn't ratify it, but he didn't veto it. He just let it sit. And by operation of law, Any legislation that comes to the president's desk that is not either ratified or vetoed becomes law effectively after 10 days. So that eventually became law. But he signed the waiver. And it came up again, and he signed the waiver. A year later, 1994, Israel made peace with Jordan. They signed a peace treaty with King Hussein, and all of this happened before the legislation. I'm not going to ruin any of that. So he waived it again, kept waiving. And then they had a few more agreements with the Palestinian Authority up until 1999 before the Second Intifada. But all of these agreements were during those waivers. Nope, 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 nope. So, okay, so for 22 years, George Bush II, can you imagine? George Bush II, the man who invaded Afghanistan and Iraq on the basis of lies and killed so many people. Even he waived, even he put a waiver, even he signed off on it because he realized this would be destructive. Obama did the same thing. Here comes Trump. Trump signs the waiver and says, okay, you know what? We can't move it right now, but I'm going to make a declaration. I'm going to say that I agree with this and that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. What did that ultimately do for what is popularly known as the so-called peace process? Hanan Ashrawi came on TV and said that ultimately destroyed it. That destroyed the peace process. Of course, I don't believe that there was even such a thing as a peace process. But with that move, a lot of commentators said people in his own cabinet disagreed with him. They said you're going to cause mass violence because of this. Because not only are people within your administration against it, the whole world is against it. Customary international law is against it. So you can't be for something that the whole world is against, especially with something as sensitive as Jerusalem, the most powerful real estate in the world. You're messing with right now. I mean, he loves real estate, but he doesn't understand that this is worth more than all of his real estate. He thinks this is just a natural thing that he can just do and everything will be okay. What is troubling is that there are members of his administration that are pushing this, presenting it as though it's okay and it doesn't harm anyone. Benjamin Netanyahu, who's the prime minister right now, he was prime minister in 1996. That was his first time as prime minister. That was his first premiership. In 1996, what did he do? That's when he started the excavation under Haram al-Sharif, under the noble sanctuary, where the Aqsa and Qubbat al-Sakhra both sit. That's essentially a practical way of saying we claim sovereignty over this land. That's when he began that excavation process in 1996. 2 years before that, the Ibrahimi Mosque was under attack by a Zionist settler who killed 29 worshippers in the Ibrahimi Mosque in Al-Khalil, known as Hebron. Killed 29 people. What did Israel do? They created two separate locations. One access for Jews, one access for Palestinians. Many Palestinians fear that one day they're going to do the same thing with Al-Aqsa. Create a separate area for Jews to enter, separate area for Palestinians to enter, and divide the noble sanctuary. They fear that could happen. And there's good reason to think that could happen. There are settler groups called the Temple Faithful, the Elad, I believe they're called. These groups, who are guided by a Christian fundamentalist ideology that essentially says that the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa have to be destroyed, they have to be moved to Mecca, and we have to build our third temple in that area. And there's people in his cabinet that believe this. This is why this is dangerous. This is not a superficial thing. This is serious. The Al-Aqsa is at stake right now. Al-Aqsa is at stake because of U.S. policy and because of Israeli policy and because of our acquiescence. We as Muslims need to stand up for Al-Aqsa. We as Muslims cannot treat Al-Aqsa as only a Palestinian issue. We cannot nationalize this issue. We can't make it into a Palestinian issue. If that were the case, then it's only a problem for 200,000 people, not 1.8 billion people, but only 200,000. That's how many Palestinians live in Jerusalem. So that's it. Leave it up to those 200,000. This is a problem for all 1.8 billion of us. We have to be involved. We have to educate our young. We have to show them the history. We have to engrave it in their minds, so that when they go out in public, they know how to respond to these slanderous attacks about Islamic history, about Palestinian presence, about the continuity of justice throughout the Islamic period. They need to understand this is serious. And by declaring it the capital of Jerusalem, not only is that against some members of his own administration, it's against long-standing international law, it's against long-standing history. History shows that sovereignty belongs to those original inhabitants. That the original inhabitants are the ones that have the real legitimate claim of sovereignty over them. And international law, in a sense, recognizes that. Now, international law is not always in favor of what is just, but it's what we have to work with right now. But it's not always in favor of what is just. I mean, under international law, it would seem that all of this, or at least this, the white there, is under Israeli sovereignty. So if we're going to use international law, we have to be consistent, but we have to emphasize the rights of those original inhabitants. Haqq al-Awda, the right of return, the right of Jerusalem to be an international zone, not under Israeli sovereignty. These things, so long as our young people are armed with these facts, so long as they know this legal history, not just the religious history, but the legal history, so long as they know that, they'll be able to go out in the public and refute the Zionist propaganda. They'll be able to make sure that everyone that watches the news understands that there is another side. Notice when you watch the news, when they want to talk about Palestine, or they want to talk about Al-Quds, they don't have Muslim representatives. They don't have Palestinian scholars. They don't have any of that. They have two propagandists talking about, how it's a wonderful place for Jews and Christians and Muslims, and how Israel has granted the rights of everybody, and all of this wonderful stuff. They never hear our perspective. They never hear our voice. So we have to make it known to them. We have to teach them and educate them and let them know that Palestine belongs to us. Thank you. I didn't go too long because I wanted to go through any questions that you guys may have about either the legal specifics or the history. I'll be glad to answer anybody's questions. Does anybody have any questions?
I mean, the present map is on the right most, right?
Right.
Does the PA leadership or the Palestinian people believe that they can go back and redraw the lines to the 1947 or 1967, given the present atmosphere and the international law does not stand with justice?
Right. I mean, international law stands with justice on some issues. On this territorial point, yes and no. Now you asked me what does the PA do?
Yeah.
The PA is
You mentioned
right. But Hanan Ashrawi is in the minority when it comes to how she represents the PA. Saab Barakat and Mahmoud Abbas, these guys are the ones that have a completely different view on what needs to happen. They are fervent two-state supporters. They want to go to this. The PA They want to go to peace.
But is it
Now,
achievable?
what's that?
Is it achievable?
Is it achievable? Well, I'm representing AMP. So as answering for myself, no, I do not think so. I don't think that this solution is viable anymore. Given that there is demographic parity between the East and the West. In all of this land here, there's approximately 7 million Jews that live there and approximately 7 million Palestinians that live there. So we have demographic parity. Notwithstanding the Palestinian refugees, we're not even getting to them. That's 7, 8, 9 million by themselves. So if they return to their homes, there's a demographic shift overnight. But as it stands right now, you have about 6.5 million Jews here in all of the white. You have about 500,000 settlers in the West Bank, so that's about 7 million. You have about 1.82 million Palestinians here, about 1.5 to 1.8 Palestinians in Gaza, and about 2.5 to 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank. I'll put those numbers together, we have demographic parity right now. That's why this is such a problem for Israel. Because if they want to annex this whole territory and give everybody there at least the rights that the Palestinians here have, well, Netanyahu is not going to be prime minister anymore. Because now these Palestinians can vote and they're going to run him out of office. And they're going to change the structure totally from a racist one into a pluralistic one, into one based on equality. They don't want that. So at the very least, actually, this is something that I actually forgot to get into. I'm going to get into it right now. Okay. I was going to get into that in the Q&A, and this is the perfect question for it. Okay. This is the West Bank right now. Okay. Okay. This blue area here, not this white, this blue area here is what's called Area C. This was designed under the Oslo Accords in 1995. They separated the West Bank into three main areas: Areas A, Areas B, and Area C. This blue represents the Area C. This dark blue represents Greater Jerusalem. So they've expanded the territory of Jerusalem. They expanded it in 67 when they annexed it by 65 kilometers. And now they expanded it even further. And they included large settlement blocks all the way south to Beit Lahem. This is now all of Jerusalem. But why is this dark blue there? And why is it shaped so weird, right? I'm going to show you that in a minute. But look at the white spots here. Notice something about it. An Israeli historian who favors Palestinian rights said that the West Bank now looks like Swiss cheese. You know how Swiss cheese looks? There's holes in it. The holes are the Palestinian communities. And if you look at Swiss cheese, the holes don't intersect. They're not contiguous. There's gaps between each hole. So this is exactly what they're trying to do. They're separating all of the communities. If you want to get from Ramallah to Nablus, it's not a quick process. It should be, but it's not, because nothing is contiguous. You have to enter what? The blue area, Area C, that is under full Israeli control. That's where you have, now watch this. So these are all the Palestinian areas, right? Areas A and B. Area C covers it all. In Area C, what Area C essentially does is fragments the Palestinian communities. It makes it hard to live in the Palestinian areas because of that. Now, there are some areas that are considered normalized, where you don't get a sense of an occupation, but even though there is an occupation, and those are only some areas in Area A. Ramallah, for example, you don't have daily incursions. You don't have soldiers coming in and demolishing homes. So Zionists love to point to Ramallah. Ramallah is a thriving city. There's no occupation. What are you guys talking about? But then you go to Jenin, you go to Khalid, you go to Hebron. Ooh, there's war down there. Settlers armed with guns, separating these communities. But I want to get back to this, because this is a topic about Jerusalem. This dark blue here. Look at this dark blue. This red line represents the current wall that's declared illegal under international law. The International Court of Justice, in a 2004 advisory opinion, declared this wall to be illegal under international law and must be dismantled. But look at how far this goes. Here, there's a reason for that. They want all of Jerusalem and more. They want to make this the greater Jerusalem area. So that's why the wall is structured in this way. And notice this. There's some orange dots here, right? In between these walls, separating families, separating communities, separating someone from his job, separating someone from his farm, from his livelihood, from his olive trees. That's what it's doing to these communities. This is not by accident. This is by design. They're doing this. But what do they say? It's for security reasons. During the second Intifada, we had so many killings. We had to set this up because we want any more killings. So this is for security purposes only. And that is why this red line stretches all the way to here. Because they want this to eventually become the border of the state of Israel. The reason why they don't want to go further because there's too many Palestinians. Remember, the fundamental goal of Zionism is threefold. Okay? The first one, the conquest of land. We have to first conquer the land. They did that. Okay? Second, we must dispossess the indigenous, kick them out of their homes. Third, the ingathering of the exiles. Bring as many Jews from the outside in so that we can change the demographic balance, but get rid of as many Palestinians as we possibly can, gaining as much land as we possibly can. So they don't want to go further because now there's too many Palestinians in these orange areas. We don't want them to be part of our territory, but we're going to maintain control through Area C. We have military presence here. We have full control of the areas around. Now I'm going to make this map look a little messy, okay? Because it is messy in the West Bank. It's not such a clean picture, okay? So even in those areas, these darker orange dots represent the highly concentrated Palestinian areas. Notice how you see a lot of them here in the south. But even those areas are fragmented. Even those areas. So there's fragmentation within fragmentation in the Palestinian areas. These are closures. These are, I see a lot of images of these that make Palestinians look like, they're animals, caged up, closures, and they're all over the West Bank. But notice here, so many of them here. Why this? Jerusalem, Al-Quds. We have to close that as much as possible. This is the most important part right here. All of this is significant, but here especially. We're going to make this look a little bit more messy. You guys ready? Okay. Now, they've established new communities in these areas. This new red area. Okay? What is it that we hear in the media a lot about? We hear a lot in the media about settlements. Settlements. They encompass, they say, it's only 1% of the land. Settlements is not the barrier to peace. It's the unwillingness of Palestinians to recognize Israel as the state of the Jews. That's the real problem. It's not the settlements. The settlements are only a byproduct. of the overall occupation, overall apartheid system, this matrix of control. When you combine settlements with all of the stuff that I'm talking about, and it looks really messy. These settlements are weaved into these Palestinian communities. So when Palestinian community wants to go from one community to another, they're gonna see a settlement, or they're gonna see a closure, or they're gonna see a checkpoint. This is what they mean when they say freedom of movement. But they always go back to Ramallah. You can go anywhere you want in Ramallah, right? Because they know Americans don't read about this stuff. When they think West Bank, they think Ramallah. They don't think the overall West Bank. They don't even know what Diffin means. They don't know what West Bank means. Now we have military zones. This dark blue. Is this looking messy yet? Looks like a spaghetti plate with 20 different ingredients. How do you mesh through them? This is the life right now in the West Bank. Notice how they put these military zones there. You know, people actually get hurt from it because there's a sign that says danger, firing area, entrance forbidden. But that encompasses a whole swath of area. In the two-state solution that Benjamin Netanyahu talks about, this is why this is a military zone. He wants to maintain a permanent military presence here. And notice his argument. Well, we don't want a militant Islamist country from the east to attack us, so we have to maintain this presence. And there are people who are Zionists that laugh at this. They say, who's to your east? Your best friend. What are you talking about? You made peace with them. They're not going to do anything to you. You don't need a military presence there. Oh, now we have Daesh. Now we have ISIS. ISIS may infiltrate, may take over Jordan. It's always based on security. It's unfounded. It's an unfounded basis. It's not a basis in fact, but it's made up. And their whole argument is based on myth. It's based on an extreme lie. They have to reverse the facts 180 to make their point. I'll give you some brief examples. So, a land without a people for a people without a land. That's the famous Zionist slogan, right? We took a land that we took a people that don't have a land to a land without a people. Notice how extreme of a lie that is, because there are a people. They make up 100% of that about 95% of that population, and they have full ownership of that land. So you have to reverse the facts on its head to make your point. You can't make your point with a small lie. It has to be a big lie. And then you reverse the facts on its head. Same thing here. We might get attacked based on security. We can't have them there. There's nature reserves as well that also divide the communities and are sometimes even within the Palestinian communities. This makes up 10% of the West Bank. So they say settlements, 1%. But then you combine the 1% with the 10% of nature reserves. The percentage in Area C of occupied land, the settlements, the seam zone, the closures, the military zone. When you combine all of that, now the percentage is very, very high. It's not 1%. Because the settlements is only one aspect of that matrix of control. If it was just settlements without checkpoints, without military closures, without any of this other stuff, without military presence, without armed settlers, without any of that, yeah, maybe settlements would not be that big of a deal. But because it's combined with all of this, that you have these problems in terms of freedom of movement, in terms of gaining rights. The international community, international law, says that all of this is illegal. all of it is illegal under international law. And Jerusalem, the Quds, is under attack as we speak. Legislatively, administratively. Maybe not militarily at present, but in terms of the legal, political, diplomatic process, it is under attack. And it is up to us to educate our young people, to let them know this deep history, from Sayyidina Muhammad all the way up until the present. This deep religious connection that we have, this historical connection, this cultural connection. We're all connected to a Quds. This is not just a Palestinian issue. It's important for us to not Palestinianize this issue, to not make it about them only. Because just like I said earlier, if you make it about them only, you're making it a problem for 200,000 inhabitants and not 1.8 billion people throughout the world. This is exactly what they want to do. When the conflict first started, it was the Arab-Israeli conflict. Then it transformed into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Well, why did that happen? That was a shrewdness on their part. They wanted to eliminate as many parties as possible so they can focus on this community that's in our way without the involvement of any other community. That's why when Egypt decided to make peace, that's why they gave back the whole Sinai in 1979. There's a reason for that. Not because they love to give up territory because Zionists love peace, but they determined that if we remove Egypt from the conflict itself, then we remove the major player from interfering in our affairs with the Palestinians. So Menachem Begin, the leader of Israel at the time, said, we'll give them back all of the Sinai, so long as they don't say anything about the West Bank and Gaza in the Golan. They ended up agreeing to that. Okay, we'll sign it. Because now we removed you, we gave you back your land, you're away. Now we don't have to worry about your wars. We just focus on the Palestinians. What's that? Okay, yeah, question, not a problem. Question was, can you explain the difference between Judaism and Zionism? Very, very simple explanation. Judaism is the religion of Moses. It is the Jewish religion that Jews adhere to. That encompasses togetherness, equality, human rights, basic fundamental fairness. This is Judaism. Zionism, and Judaism has existed for thousands of years. Zionism, on the other hand, is a recent phenomenon. It's been around for over 100 years. And this is an ideology made up of mainly atheistic secular Jews. These Jews use the Bible to invoke religion, but they don't believe it. One Israeli historian said, and this is actually pretty funny. He said that what's funny about Zionists is that they believe that God promised them the land, but they don't believe in God. How does that coincide? That's a contradiction in terms. How do you believe God gave you the son when you don't believe in God? But they knew that if they invoke God, because God is in the Bible, and we can somehow relate, we can create some kind of mythical connection between the biblical land of Israel to modern day Israel. If we can create that connection, and because people love God, they'll fall into our belief system. This is exactly what they're doing with Christian Zionists. Fundamentalist, dispensationalist, Christian fundamentalist Zionists. These Christian Zionists make up the majority of Zionists in the United States. It's not Jewish Zionists, it's Christian Zionists. And these Zionists believe in the final battle of Armageddon. But notice at its core, Christian Zionism is anti-Semitic. Why is it anti-Semitic? Because in that war of Armageddon, they believe that the Jews, sorry, okay, all right. I didn't know if you had a question. But Christian Zionists believe that the Jews, it's okay. Christian Zionists believe that when the return of Jesus happens, the Jews will convert to Christianity. And then the temple that they build will be desecrated. This is anti-Semitic at in nature. Why are the Zionists okay with this? They want this alliance with Christian Zionists. Why is that? Because they say, well, we don't believe that what they're saying is going to happen. So if they're going to support us based on that, we'll take their support. They want to give us money because they believe that one day we're going to end up being Christian. Whatever. So long as they give us money and support us and prop us up, we're fine with that. Zionism, racist, ethnocentric, exclusivist ideology. Judaism, a monotheistic religion from the Abrahamic faith. So that's the essential difference between Judaism and Zionism. Now, I want us to make sure that we get involved. Okay, I represent AMP, the American Muslims for Palestine in Chicago. I would like all of you to come to our fundraising event. We don't have the exact date yet, but it's going to be within the next few months. Our purpose is education. Our purpose is to educate especially our young people, and to arm them with information and facts through media, through political campaigns, through legislative campaigns, through protests, you name it. We want to remain active on behalf of Palestine, on behalf of Al-Quds, on behalf of Al-Aqsa. And this is a connection for all of us, not just us Palestinians. This is a must for all of us, not just us Palestinians. So when we go home today, next day, and the days after, keep Al-Quds in your heart, keep Jerusalem in your heart. Inshallah, Palestine will be free.
One question I have, not related to areas. Is the aid reaching Palestinians from US?
Well, okay. The Palestinian Authority is receiving aid from the United States and from the European Union. But what is that aid used for? Israel loves that they receive aid. Why? Because that will shut them up. That will keep the leaders, the corrupt leaders, happy, and they're using it as a way to maintain the occupation. It's a security apparatus for us. They're working for us. So the aid is really for us. They're helping us maintain this mess that you see. So they're okay with that aid, because that aid is not going to build up Palestinian communities. It's not going to make sure that we get the Palestinian refugees enough care that they need. That's not what it's going for. It's going for Edward Said, a longtime Palestinian humanist who passed away over almost 15 years ago. He said that PA essentially became the subcontractors for Israel. And if you know anything about subcontracting, that's essentially what it is. You have a project, you give it to somebody else, you give them the tools that they need to maintain that project, and you sit back and watch it happen. And if something goes wrong, you fire that person, or you get somebody else in his place, or you tell them to do it the right way. This is what needs to stop. We cannot subcontract Jerusalem to a party that's willing to work with the modern day crusaders. We have to be like Salah ad-Din, like Umar ibn Khattab, and reach out to the communities so that we can create a sense of pluralism and equality among the communities. Make sure our kids never forget. True equality, true peace in Al-Quds came under Islamic rule. It was Muslim rule that created this harmony, this peaceful environment. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre remains in its place. This ancient church remains in its place because of the act of Umar ibn Khattab. Because he wanted to preserve it. He did not want to desecrate it. Islam teaches pluralism. The shrines in Haram al-Sharif, Kubut al-Sakhra, Masjid al-Aqsa, and the Mosque of Umar. These structures give testament to all of the prophets within the prophetic tradition, not just the last prophet, because we embrace them all. So make sure we tell our kids that this is a message for all of us. We must maintain our attachment and our connection to Palestine and Al-Quds. Honestly, I'm not sure if we found the place yet, but it's going to be on Facebook. It's going to be all over the websites, but it's going to be within the next couple of months or so. and we'll let you guys know. We have a lot of other events coming up. We have our next event in May. You can get the exact dates shortly, but please, we'd love for this community here to come out and see the work that we do on behalf of Palestine and on behalf of Al-Aqsa. And we hope that you can join us. And we'll join you for more events and more gatherings. It's my pleasure to be here to talk to you. We have to reach out to more communities, Muslims and non-Muslims alike, and teach them the true message of Al-Aqsa and the history of Palestine.
Assalamu alaikum. We have some tea and snacks. Please help yourself and prepare it and give the tea. We have two announcements also. Next Saturday, we have here's a seminar here. So if you're interested in that, please come here and join us. And the Saturday after that, we have a Dawa program that KP